Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talking Points with Preferred Health Magazine. I'm your host, Angelina Cappiello. And today my guest is Melissa Cassiliano, author of I'm Not Invisible, Franny's Neighborhood Mission. This wonderful children's book teaches us about inclusivity and the ability of seeing beyond ourselves and great understanding of others. So stay tuned to this interview. You don't want to miss it. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
I really love that we're doing this because, you know, you're our wonderful columnist and you speak about so many personal things, but something that we all relate to. And Franny's story is definitely one of those things. So I've been wanting to talk to you about your book for some time now. I know it's getting wonderful feedback. I know you've been out there promoting it. So I'm just happy we're here today to do this.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been quite the start. So It's been exciting and lots to talk about.
All right, good. Well, let's start. So I know you love your story also. You also just recently wrote about that, you know, her being born and prematurely and your stay in NICU. So that's all part of your journey as well. I kind of wanted to start there very quickly just to give a little background information.
Sure.
So if you wouldn't mind, you know, again, you said it so compassionately in Preferred Health Magazine Spring Edition. So I hope people read it there too. But I want you to speak a little bit about your journey in the beginning.
Yeah. So from the beginning, you know, this book holds so many perspectives, and the main perspective is mine as a mother and the inspiration that it drew from me as a mother of my daughter, Angelina, who was a 29-year-old, week preemie. And that was not an easy journey to go through. And going through that really shaped who I became as a mother, who we became as parents, and it made our journey a little bit different than we would have thought throughout life. You know, not that I would change it, but it became our normal. And through that, there's many challenges that we face with her and that she faces in life due to her being a preemie and other challenges that grew as she matured and as she developed throughout her life. So seeing those challenges and going through that really showed me that there was a need still in our world, because today she's 15. And I wrote this book probably when she was 9, when she was just kind of interacting with her peers. And when you're that young, there's not as much of a gap between your peers as there is as you grow a little bit more. And seeing that gap just made me realize, you know what, I wish the world can understand her a little bit more. And it wasn't just through my daughter, it was through me as an educator, the other perspective that I bring to the book as well, and watching those children in my classroom who are just not understood. And why aren't they understood? And I think more about that now. I think more because as teachers and as parents, we don't really address it. We don't really talk about what those challenges are that some individuals face.
Sure.
And why not? You know, we can, because if we bring them up and if we make them normalized and, you know, talking about it, then there's no hiding it from the individual like Franny or my daughter. And then the world understands them a little bit better. And that is, you know, I say I have many whys to the book. That's one of my major whys, is just making the world a little bit more knowledgeable and understanding those who are faced with challenges. And by doing that through inclusivity and actions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it does start in the home, right? To raise our children more compassionately and more understanding and more accepting of others. And it's terrible because we see this through the generations. I mean, it's almost like a human thing, you know, that we're like that. But it really does take that nurturing from your parents to really help you to understand, you know, as a child, about inclusivity and being inclusive and accepting people, good and bad, and looking for the good in others. And that's something that my mother always taught us. I remember her saying clearly, it's probably one of the best pieces of advice that she's ever given me, is to just accept people, you know, rich, poor, you know, heavy, skinny, like black, white, whatever it was, like, and to really just look for the good in everyone, that there is good in everyone. And, you know, as a kid, I guess it's a little bit harder because they're immature, but I loved the way you approached Franny's perspective, because it's not like you're just writing about a girl named Franny. Of course, this is your daughter, it's your inspiration, but you take us through her personal journey. Like we're understanding her better because you're speaking in her, you're Franny. You are right. Franny. And so that was really helpful, I think, and really wonderful to experience, because you really get to experience a day in her life.
Yeah, and in doing that, I thought it was really important that Franny understood the rest of the world as well. So she learns that, and another topic that, you know, our children definitely need is seeing beyond ourselves. And Franny also had to see beyond herself that everybody goes through their own challenges as well. So as much as, you know, I make this story about Franny and inspired by my daughter and other children who are faced with challenges like her, it is a story for everyone where we can learn to look beyond ourselves. You know, everyone goes through their own stuff in life, right? And their own challenges. So I like how Franny learned that throughout the story.
Yeah, that was a great, you know, not a turnaround, but it was a great, like, encompassing of yes, everyone has their challenges, and you don't have to be disabled or have any kind of disabilities for that to be a fact. We all go through it. I wanted to just say, you know, you said you started writing this book and when she was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So why now? She's 15 now. Was it something that you held off on, or were you like, am I sure? Or was it just that you're going through the process of, you know, writing, and you know how that takes a while? And what was your journey for becoming an author?
So this was, you know, it kind of just happened to me. And, you know, I've always had a passion for writing, always loved writing. And it was during COVID, just watching her play, I wrote this story in my phone and it stayed there. Oh, and yeah, and then I had the amazing opportunity.
Thanks for tuning into Talking Points. If you're enjoying this book review interview with Preferred Health Magazine, please remember to press that subscribe button now.
There's another author through my publisher, and in connecting with her through Miami Makeover that she was doing, you know, I spoke to her and I said, you know, I wrote a book and it's in my phone. And she goes, really? She goes, send it to me, and brought her to tears. And she helped pass it along to her publisher, and Inspired Girl Enterprises, my publisher, saw the need in the world for it. And, you know, her belief in it kind of brought it to life. And then it kind of took about almost 2 years to get it published. The biggest challenge in publishing wasn't my writing, wasn't the story. It was finding an illustrator who aligned with my vision. Oh. So that took the longest part of getting the story published. And it was quite the process and fun, because throughout 13 years of teaching young students how to write and using their imagination, it was a very similar process. And I love that I took that perspective, the teacher perspective, again, and the writing perspective of how to add those elements in the book, because I've really made sure to use it as a learning tool also. So like how I can use it to teach writing, I could teach vocabulary, I could teach literary elements. All of those things were really important for me to incorporate in the book. Who is another author through my publisher, and in connecting with her, writing it as well. So all of that kind of came full circle, and here we are.
I love that. I love that. And that's right. You had 13 years as a teacher, right?
Yes, 13 years.
So you really can get into, I mean, like you said earlier, like, you know, you saw challenges in some of your students, like earlier on. So you can really get into the psyche of children and kind of like how they process learning and all that good stuff. I did want to ask you though, I mean, like we were saying, the title suggests a focus on being seen and acknowledged, right? That's what Franny wants.
Yes.
And so that's really important for all of us, right? We all want that. Look at how we are today on social media. If somebody doesn't like our page, we're freaking out. But I want to say, like, what message were you hoping to convey about invisibility? Because it's not just about inclusivity, it's about invisibility, right, especially for young readers. So kind of through Franny's journey, what was the message that you were hoping to get across there?
not everybody has a voice. Not everybody knows how to use their voice. And everybody, no matter who they are, deserves to be seen and heard. And in the title, yes, the title is I'm Not Invisible, Franny's Neighborhood Mission, but the brand and the hope is to have a series, and it's an I'm Not Invisible series. So, it will keep going because, and, maybe Franny is always the main character. Maybe she's not, but the premise is that everybody deserves to be seen and heard. And that was the idea behind it.
Well, let me put this here, my back screen. But there is a little cliffhanger at the end, which I did love. And I think she's going to tackle school next. I think it was, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I love
Yes.
that.
She wants, yes. Yep. Yep. And it will keep going. There's always, one of the main things that I loved as an educator is having authors come in and teach the children. And when they came in, I'll never forget one of, I think it was David Adler who came in, and Adler said, every moment is a writable moment, right? Realistic fiction. We can meet any characters throughout our lives, and we can turn those characters into storytelling. You change them a little bit. I've had children in the neighborhood come to me, oh, is that me? And I really them. This is realistic fiction. No, that's not you, but there are characters that could be inspired by real life, and that is the joy of writing and being a realistic fiction author now. So I enjoy it. Even with my daughter, right? Of course, I am so inspired by her, and the events in her life, but also my classroom really inspired this. So I try to be really cognizant of none of this is real, right? It's realistic fiction. So there's nothing that truly happened, but there might have been events that made me think of these ideas.
So now let me ask you this. So the book is about Franny. When you completed your book, and did she know the process? Did she know that mommy was doing this, and this is, where we're at now? We're waiting for an illustrator. Like, did she come with you on the journey, or did you kind of go through the journey and then present it to her?
So as I was going through it, one of the challenges that she faces is the spotlight on her. She's not very good with that. And she doesn't want it to be, we're very conscious of putting a spotlight on her because she's shy about that, or, highlight the challenges that Franny faces versus what Angelina faces are a little bit different, similar in a lot of ways, but they are still different. So that highlight and that focus, she kind of shies away from. So there hasn't been, she knows it's there. And one of the main hopes that I had in writing this is, one, respecting her privacy and, making sure that she's not upset about this in any way. But my hope as a mother, and a big reason for me taking this on, is I hope she's the one who goes into the schools one day, and that she's the one who reads this to others, and she continues the series because she has that potential, and hopefully one day she sees that, and this is just paving the way for something that she can do later in life.
Oh my God, Melissa, I love that you just said that. It's almost kind of like leaving the legacy, right? So it's kind of like, and she can maybe carry that on. I really love that's a thought process, and that's something that you had in mind for her to continue her story, or to or maybe just start another, who knows what her chapters are going to be later in life, right? So
yes, and who knows, and then that was a big conversation as a family we had to have in putting the story out there, and knowing that there are the similarities and the connections between the two. So, and that was again a big driving force, Yeah, purpose. It's all about purpose in life. And you know what? This can be her purpose if she chooses.
Yeah. I love that you're saying this now. What about should I mention your son's name? I don't know.
Sure.
If you put that out.
Yeah.
Giovanni, right?
Giovanni. Yeah.
Giovanni.
Yep.
So
yep,
how
Giovanni.
is he like with his sister? I know he's a great brother. I know this on a different level, but talk about the family and talk about kind of their relationship also, because that's her first friend.
Yes, it is her first friend, and her friendship with him is typical sibling relationship. And, they are faced with their challenges, and they argue, they fight over things. It's, everything is very similar. He's he is very good with her, but I want to say there's no difference in our house, you know, like this is his normal too. It's our normal, and there's no difference. And, you know, there are some times where like, well, you need to understand a little bit more and you need to be understanding. And that's a lot of pressure. And I meet a lot of people throughout these events where we overlook the siblings sometimes, especially when there's only two of them. And we put a lot of expectations on my son, who is the younger sibling. And, you know, you have to be aware of that sometimes, of the pressure. And, you know, we put a lot of independence and reliance on him, where, you know, you have to remember that one, he is the younger one. And he'll never forget, we moved here, he was 5, she was 8, and they would go down the block, or she was almost 9, and we'd be like, okay, watch your sister. Here's a 5-year-old who was so independent even then. We're like, watch out for your sister, you know, and he just always, he's growing up a little bit quicker. And I think that's, you know, we try to be aware of that, and we try to have understanding, and kind of slow it down.
Yeah, because they're growing up. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I had a couple of cousins were born with disabilities, and one of my cousins was born in the middle of both of her brother and sister, and so it was kind of like what you're saying. They have to grow up just a little bit, you know, but everybody has a certain journey, and maybe he'll be absolutely better for it. I'm sure he is.
Right. Yeah. So I don't see it any different. Yeah. But in writing this, you know, at first it was all Franny, you know, none of the other characters had anything going on. And that was the twist that, you know, maybe 3 meetings into my writing and editing, I said, you know what, it would be really great if we can have the other characters, you know, who bring some surprises to the table in the book. And that, I think, really helped to shape the book in making it more relatable to everybody and what they go through. Another thing I chose to do is not put a diagnosis on Franny. Franny does not have a diagnosis. I did not want to pinpoint one area that made this book fall into one category. And that was, the premise was to make it relatable for everybody. So that was another important aspect.
And that was really important. I mean, you didn't do that, but you did mention a couple of things, like she has coordination issues, and you did say a couple of things, and that was really interesting because there is no real diagnosis. You're not saying, hey, this is what it is. So this book does differ in that fact, because you'll hear about books, you know, children with autism disorder or something else, but you're not saying that. So it's kind of saying, hey, listen, we're not all put under one umbrella. And that I really love that wasn't the case, you know, and that is so true. Like, not everyone has disability that just falls into one umbrella. So it's, you know, it was nice that I saw that you left that out. There wasn't anything like that.
No, and thank you, because my daughter Angelina for years didn't fall under an umbrella. And actually, right after I wrote this, probably a month ago, she was just diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And it took years and years. We're 15 now. And, you know, that's a whole nother conversation. And I got to tell you, it was, for us, a wonderful journey versus what it would have been at age 2 and 3 for her and for us as parents. Like, to understand who she was already and then to get this diagnosis really changed, I think, how we reacted. So she's always been not under an umbrella up until this point. And and going forward, like I said, it gets harder as they get older now, and the gaps just keep widening. So it's easier when they're younger.
True. Now, what's the one thing that you hope the young readers, you know, or the families take or think about, you know, after they finish reading the book? What's the message that you hope they kind of walk away with?
I hope they know how to friend somebody who, you know, who doesn't have a voice, how to make them feel included. Like, think about that one person who is maybe sitting alone, or maybe is on the playground, not playing hide and seek with anybody, you know, how to approach them, you know, by not just thinking they're shy or not thinking that they can't play. They just need that extra guidance and knowing how to go up to that person and approach that person. And that is inclusivity through action. Like I say, we send our kids into the world, we say to be kind, but kindness, is not just words. And, we have a growing population that needs our understanding. And if we can just ring a doorbell and include that one person who is probably sitting in the room alone, or, like I said, in different scenarios at a birthday party, the noise is too much for them, offer assistance. But again, it comes with the education and just being able to talk about it. And I think that's where we differ in generations, Angelina, what you mentioned, right? These are issues that we've had for generations now. And it's not that they're not getting better, but I do believe that we are able to talk a little bit more freely about things. And it's okay, right? It's okay to say, oh, as the individual, I have autism, and, these are the things that bother me, or these are the things that I would like you to do, when you include me. And that's okay. And as teachers, I think they have to be okay in speaking to that, and I don't think we're singling people out. I think we're making the world understand better. There was a famous quote that said, we spend so much time teaching our children how to interact with the world, but the world doesn't spend enough time knowing how to interact with our children or, any of the population. It helps us learn that we're not so different, right? By not putting an umbrella on this, noises bother me. Oh, wow. Like, I don't like when this happens either. And like, those are, things that are just normal throughout our lives, that you might experience as a neurotypical individual versus somebody who is not. So, it just makes us realize that we're not so different, and that's okay. And that's why also, I wrote this book, but I've learned that this is a tool. I wrote a book, but it's a tool. It's a guidance. And there's more of a mission that I have here now. And in going into schools, going into the community, I see what's needed. And what's needed, I created the Power of One program where I could go into schools and I can teach others about how they could be the one. And that is something, again, that relates to us all. Think about the one who inspired you in life. I know I can think about, one who's inspired me in life. And we could be that one for the person sitting next to us, for that one who doesn't have a voice. And, it's going in and talking about that and really embracing the need.
I love that you're doing that, because I did see that on your website as well, and also I think on your Instagram, I think it is that you have. You talk about programs, and you actually in your book you also provide a link for parents for other resources for them. So why you're doing this? I know it's your passion, and I love that you're going around spreading that word. So what is the feedback coming from the schools?
So right now we're here in Florida and school's about to end. So it's really just, and I just got published in December. So hoping that it grows more throughout the fall and we align more. But from what I did, I went into one of the schools, and it was actually a school of all neurodiverse individuals. And, I had to kind of switch where I was going with that one. We do talk about how we can have one person to be inspired by, and model, and kind of changed it up a little bit. But the feedback was great. That school's having a camp. They want me to come back in. And the students were such a joy. One little boy I'll never forget. He goes, "I could see Franny on Netflix." I'm like, I can too. Yeah. But throughout the community, though, anyone who, I get to speak with, anybody who reads the book really understands that, there is a need. And again, it's teaching empathy, inclusivity, kindness. And one thing that we say our empathy is not innate anymore. We're all stuck, our children are being taught to in tunnel vision, and we need to go beyond that a little bit. And there's actually a new program here in Florida. It's the Florida Resiliency program that's just being rolled out. And there's so much of that program that I think we're first in the nation to adopt it, that my book falls under. So in aligning with that program and what I'm doing, I hope to see more pick up in the fall with this as well.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations for that. That makes me so excited. I'm so happy for you. The book is I'm Not Invisible, Franny's Neighborhood Mission. Let's hold it up. Woo! where's my thing? Where's my camera? Oh my God, the screen behind me just not working out. Thank you. I'll put it up later when I edit. So tell me where everyone can get your book and get a copy.
So right now I am still on melissacass.com. I can set a mass distribution date, but we're kind of holding out because we got some big projects in the works. So pretty soon you will find it wherever books are sold online, but right now just at melissacass.com.
Excellent. I'll put that information here as well for everyone to see and get themselves a copy. Thank you so much for coming on today to speak with me. And everyone, please catch Melissa Cassiliano also at Preferred Health Magazine. She is our wonderful columnist with the Making Sense column, Making Sense with Melissa Cassiliano. Thank you, Mel. This is great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Talking Points with Preferred Health Magazine. To get your copy of I'm Not Invisible, Franny's Neighborhood Mission, please go to www.melissacass.com. That is www.melissacass.com. And for more, check out her column, Making Sense with Melissa Cassiliano, at preferredhealthmagazine.com.